Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. The often unsung heroes of any tabletop RPGs are our DMs. They spend countless hours crafting worlds, creating characters, and inventing situations for you and your party to go through to share a fantasy story. Though, like with some players, sometimes there can be DMs that are just, let's just say, less than ideal. Much like the examples in these next 3 Dungeons & Dragons horror stories. Remember to please like, comment, and subscribe to appease the algorithm dragon and help the channel grow. The channel just hit 700 subscribers, and I can't thank all of you enough for all of your support, as it's looking like the goal of hitting 1,000 by the end of the year is well within reach. Again, if you are subscribed, I am thrilled you like my content, and if you aren't, I hope to earn your subscription today. Anyways, with all the gushing done, let's get right into the stories. DM with absurd rules and ideals goes far enough to leak players' socials and ruin their image. By Reddit user TwistedDragon716. Editor's note: all the names are pseudo and aren't real, just to help paint a better picture. Greetings, my name's Justin and will be my first time posting here, so I apologize in advance. The story I'm about to tell is about a conflict that arose and built over months. It's been something I haven't been able to get to due to some life issues. But now that I have a chance, I insist you take a seat or grab a drink. The individuals involved in this group are 1. Kiki, calm and collective mother of the group. 2. Naren, best friend of Kiki and a Holly individual. 3. Grim, the youngest and wild card of the group. 4. Giggles, sweet, loud, and casual player. Max, the DM. I understand that all DMs have their own set of rules that make games engaging and fun. It's not in my right to say that rules help games keep order and structure when playing. Max was my first ever DM, and I assumed that his rules were fair. 1. No metagaming. 2. All talking must be done in character. And 3. Have fun. Max seemed like a genuinely nice person, motivated and interested in the game of D&D. Which I had only little experience of. Soon enough, after a few talks and character building, we all made our characters and met my party for the first time. They were all amazing individuals. Our chemistry worked well and I enjoyed them all. Things went super well and I was happy. But things took a turn after sessions when I would talk about our characters. In all the hype and excitement, we all wanted to talk about our characters and what plans we should get ready for. When the DM intervened and started, quote, "Guys, no metagaming, stop talking about your characters and wait," end quote. The first of many red flags. He wouldn't allow us to talk about our characters at all. Apparently, it ruined our chances of actually being in character as we brainstormed. He would do this all the time and begin to cut out our combos over and over non-stop. But I told myself, no, this is fine. Maybe he has a point and that makes sense. I shouldn't be worried. And thus the dominoes began to fall. Soon our DM's rules began to ruin our fun. He would constantly stop chatter between out of characters to discuss future plans. We couldn't stop for a single moment and think about our smartest move, and it just led to dumb mistakes. I had talked to a few players such as Kiki and Grim, agreeing that he wasn't pleasant whatsoever. But they all enjoyed the story, which he was giving them, so I tagged along with it. Being that I really had grown a strong connection over our game. Giggles unfortunately had to leave us early due to in-real-life issues. We'll get back to her. But over time we got close and soon would talk about our personal lives as friends would normally do. However, Max again wasn't appreciative of that and whined that, quote, "This chat is exclusively for D&D. I don't know why you guys are talking on here. If you want to talk, go private message each other." He was rude, narcissistic to the point where he just felt suffocating. Giggles was filling us in about her life as we were all so worried, and he'd step in to tell her to shut up. So not only were we not allowed to talk about our characters, but couldn't even talk about anything else but the game. He'd even break the rules and start arguments about sexualities. Being that a majority of us were queer, would blatantly insult us and say, quote, "Asexuals aren't real, bisexuals are fake," end quote. He crossed the straws that Naren, a sweetheart of our group, to get mad and snap back at him. When we were right, he'd cry and get defensive, saying, quote, I'll just shut up now and only talk about D&D, since you guys don't think I'm right, end quote. It's 2020, and he was in his mid-20s. At this point, I was fed up and throwing in the towel. With exams coming up and my lack of sleep, I decided to leave the group. After trying to take a break and have him get mad at me for telling him in advance, I thanked him for a great time, and with no hesitation, I was just kicked. I was free, happy to know that I no longer had to play D&D with such a prick and could focus on more important things. It was during the time that I left that Kiki had made a separate server for us to keep in contact, allowing all of us to actually speak without being stopped for breaking the rules. Giggles during that time came back to the game and she wanted to catch up. It was to my surprise that when I left, things only got worse. Max had been enraged and mad about my sudden resignation, and to top things worse, had made Giggles' level 1 character stay underleveled, forcing her to make up with, quote, more intense RP, when everyone was at level 5 at the same time. She'd get one shot cause he didn't want to, quote, ruin his story. Max's world was so unfair and inflexible, not allowing us to do what we want without him making them roll disadvantage or simply saying no. And the icing on the cake, the rule of metagaming got so bad that anytime we talked out of character, he would make characters roll at disadvantage with every roll they made. What I thought wasn't my problem had only gotten worse, and I was worried for all of them and his possessiveness. Giggles eventually left and was fed up with his bullshit, and it came to a point where I'd get reports from Grim and Kiki about Max's dumb bullshit. Whether it be about him defending himself in wine, as Giggles called him out on the things he's done. I always asked them why stay and suffer from this guy when you could clearly be enjoying other games. But to them, Max whining was something they could manage and handle, and in some way was respectable, but sad as he only grew more of a dick. Soon, Naren left and things didn't go well. He started attacking the players, Grim especially, with being the reason for all of us leaving, calling him disrespectful, rude, and selfish to other players. His words when none of us brought Grim up. Kiki, trying to defuse the situation, inevitably just couldn't do anything, and with less than 3 players decided to leave the campaign. Everyone now gone and fed up with him, he began to block and unfriend everyone. His existence vanished from our lives, till we hear of his new campaign and shitty post on Reddit, insisting that he was a, quote, fair and nice DM, which we weren't going to stand for, and replied to and revealed how much of an ass he was and warned other players. He got so desperate he deleted our comments and made a fake account to hype himself up. But we did what we wanted and were satisfied that people might have seen it. Giggles would soon come to realize that Max had leaked her account, calling her a slut whore that loves genitalia, and just got random creeps and weirdos spamming her. It was so bad she had to go private and was freaking out about the whole situation for days. And when we confronted Max, which we knew it was him because of the way he types, he would deny all accusations and act stupid. We never talked to him after that and never heard from him again. Games are supposed to be fun for both players and DMs. We got stuck in his world and had no freedom and were played more like his tokens. All he ever cared about was his world, and it shakes me that I thought he was a good DM. TLDR, DM was stuck up and rude, would ban us from talking about our characters, was homophobic and an asshole, blamed a player for his loss of other players when it wasn't their fault, and leaked socials and called them a slut. The Lion, the Witch, and the Audacity of This Bitch. How our DM killed 2 characters because a feature poked a hole in an encounter. By Reddit user Full Health Cosplay. In one of my first D&D 5e games, I decided to play as a Wood Elf Beastmaster Ranger because it's one of my favorite elements of fantasy. If you have ever played a 5e elf, you would know that one of its major features is that elves simply do not sleep. They enter a trance for rest, and they are immune to effects and spells that put them to sleep. Remember that. It will play in later. The DM was a friend of a friend, and the OG friend who introduced me wanted to have a backstory that linked the 2 of us together. It would give me a reason to join the game in progress, as well as someone to bounce RP off more easily. She played an elf warlock wizard witch, and in the joke of a name, I came up with the idea to be known as Lion, as my beast of companionship was a lion. Reskinned a wolf. DM was totally on board. My friend and I started writing quite a bit about the two we called the Lion, the Witch, and the Warlord, as her previously established backstory was her family killed by a power-hungry warlord. Despite the joke name, we were very serious about the backstory and went to great lengths with the DM to make something really interesting. The first few sessions kick off. I am introduced to the game, which is great. I love D&D and want to play this forever, I thought. When after about the third session, I began to pick up on some red flags of the DM forcing some really heavy railroad. Notably, we wanted to seek aid from the nearby town to solve a problem. But in saying, quote, "we want to set out," he stopped us, described this whole scenario how the road was closed due to rockfall, and told us we instead decided to go to the local Thieves Guild for help. An idea we all thought was dumb as shit. The other 3 players at the table argued with the DM about this, pointing out issues of him railroading them in situations I was never present for, so I sat and held my tongue. The DM was firm on his decision though, so everyone just pouted and went with it. Begrudgingly, our party headed to the Thieves Guild. After a short talk with the Thieves Guild master, some clever convincing on our player's part, and all 3 persuasion rolls being higher than a 17, we were asked to follow him into a back room to get access to a gemstone we needed to break a curse. Could have just asked the neighbor town cleric for help, but oh well. Feeling confident, we convinced this leader, even being told we passed the DCs for convincing. We walk into the room when suddenly the door shuts behind us. Ooh, spooky, and the room filled with purple gas. The DM describes that everything happens so fast we are unable to react with no rolls or saving throws. Tells us, "You all feel drowsy and collapse and sleep on the floor." So this is where my witch friend and I, the 2 elves of the party, speak up. Our abilities make us immune to sleep, so we don't get knocked out, the witch says. Yeah, and before the doors open again, I want to have Lionel guard one door while I place my bear trap at the other, I say. Q arguing with the DM that sleeping gas can't make 2 beings immune to magic-induced sleep fall asleep. We simply don't need to sleep. It's not something we can do, so this has 0 effect on us. We are awake, conscious, and can make actions. Fine, the DM gives in. You are awake, but Lionel was not allowed into the Thieves Guild at the door. All of your weapons, spellbooks, and spell-focused components were taken too. Are you nuts? Why wouldn't you say that before? We would have never gone into the Thieves Guild unarmed. We all thought we had our weapons, chimed in the witch. I call Lionel to me from the other room. I want him to help us, I say. Well, you didn't ask if you take your weapons, and you hear from the other room a howl as the Thieves Guild slays your lion, angrily stammers the DM. Guards start to enter the room with you. All the rest of you are still asleep. I should add in that the ability for Fey Ancestry does come into effect here, as the DM justified the, quote, instantaneous knockout as magic gas. The party was more upset by the fact that they had no time to react, got no chances or rolls to resist or escape, and were forced to go into that room in the first place. The DM said, he invites you to the back room, but as you walk in, the door's shut, and a purple smoke fills and you are all unconscious. Cue another 15 minutes of people arguing that doing something like that was unfair. I don't really chime in. I actually feel terrible and sad that my lion was just killed. I know it's imaginary, but I had been really happy to have a pet again, at least in my mind, so I was honestly just depressed. The DM gives into the arguing and says for my friend and I to roll for initiative, but we are still unarmed. I rolled low, but she rolled high. I cast Dimension Door 40 foot up into the street, the witch triumphantly announces, and I will grab the ranger and go through. You can't cast spells without a spell focus, the idiot DM proudly states. Dimension Door is a vocal-only spell. It doesn't need one, the witch snaps back. Well then, you try to cast it, but one of the guards counterspells it at 4th level, says the DM. That ends your turn. Over the next 3 turns, the party lays asleep on the floor while the 3 players sit pissed at their desks. Roll 20 online. The DM proceeds to counterspell or block every attempt the witch and I make to escape. We resort to just making dodge actions on our turns, back to back, hoping together that, okay, he's railroading for a reason. If we just hold the line, whatever was going to happen will happen, and it will be okay. But then, on round 4, a wall opens up to more guards with crossbows who, and I quote this one exact, riddle the 2 of you with bolts from all the crossbows at once. You lay bleeding out on the floor as your vision fades to black. No attack rolls, no damage rolls, no death saving throws, not even initiative order to get the chance to do anything. When we fade to black, we half expect to wake up with our captured party, but no. The DM says the two of us are dead and need to leave the Discord call so the others can continue without us. The witch, my good friend for a long time, can be heard sobbing on her mic. I am welling up too at the thought of my character being killed off like this and my pet dying without me. We are both messaging each other to see if the other is okay and are preparing to leave when our saviors step up to the plate. The three other members of the party, silent during the fight, erupt into an argument of such terrifying magnitude I genuinely believe a UFC fight would be less terrifying to be in. One gets up from his mic, is silent for 10 minutes, and then out of nowhere can be heard through the DM's mic, arguing and insulting him as, it turns out, he drove 10 minutes to his now former friend's house and was let inside by the DM's girlfriend who heard everything from the witch, her best friend. Why is it that I tell you this story today? What prompted me to tell a 3-year-old story on this sub? That is because this past weekend, on a beautiful island near their home, the witch and the guy who screamed at the DM at his own house got engaged and I got to go to the wedding. The DM's girlfriend broke up with him not a few weeks later as it cascaded into arguing, and she actually ended up dating the other D&D member for a bit. But that had a really bad falling out, so no happy story there. Me? I stay in touch with my friend, the witch, and will always enjoy recounting with her the story of the lion, the witch, and the audacity of this bitch. DM/player thinks game is all about himself. By Reddit user, The Rail King. I've been playing D&D with the same group of friends for nearly 3 years now. We've lost and added a person here and there, but the group has mostly been the same for the majority of the time we've been playing. It started with one of the friends, let's call him Pat, offering to create a campaign for us to play so we could give it a shot. We all thoroughly enjoyed it, and now, nearly 3 years later, we are still playing that same campaign, but with very different feelings than when we first started. That campaign was the beginning of a long road for all of us, and the one that created our first ever D&D characters. We rolled stats one night, came up with some vague backstories, and were launched into a world we knew nothing about. I would say the journey we went on from level 1 to 7 was just about the most fun we had in that campaign. Even up to level 9, we were still doing things that we thoroughly enjoyed and had fun playing the game together. During that time though, we began to notice that Pat had a little bit of a god complex. The world that we had initially been told he had created himself was slowly turning into a weird amalgamation of various different pieces of media. For the most part, no one playing really cared about this too much because the game was just fun. But slowly, this conglomerate began to noticeably only reward 3 of the players at the table. 2 friends I'll refer to as Mark and Steve, and myself. At this point, Mark and I had both learned slightly more about the incredible variety of content that D&D had to offer, including a well-known show called Critical Role. And it was around this time that we began to notice more story elements that we had been through, mirroring those of outside media. It had gone from just the world we were in, to actual manipulation of the story to mimic something we didn't quite know. What began to irk me though was just how similar my character's arc was beginning to look like Ford's from Critical Role. I was playing a paladin of Heimdall, who had been gifted a cursed sword that instead put him in the hands of Asmodeus, who wanted him to follow his bidding, very similar to how Okatoa works with Ford. Later, my character would deny Asmodeus, who in retaliation killed Heimdall, leaving me a paladin with no powers and no god. Just like that, something I had built my entire character around was shattered and tossed away like it didn't even matter. And before anyone says anything, yes, I know paladins are supposed to get their powers from their oath, not their god. But in the words of Pat, quote, "That's just not how it works in my campaign," end quote. Immediately my character was offered a token that would grant him his powers, but from a deity he didn't know. More than that, the morals that he had built his life upon protecting others and upholding justice were now replaced with a very questionable oath that could ask him to turn evil to just uphold the sacred balance. I felt cheated and as though my character was no longer my own. But it was this moment that really helped me see everything that everyone else had been through up to that point. My character was one of the last that had been changed. I guess I had just been too stubborn. But none of us had the same character we started out with. I don't mean that in a they died and had to be replaced way either. It was still our characters, but Pat had modified each of them to fit what he wanted to see in the game, not what we wanted. On top of blatantly changing our characters without checking with us first, Pat had slowly been building us up to be champions of the gods in the world, eerily similar to the way Vox Machina gathered the vestiges of Divergence and became champions in their own rights in Campaign 1. Pat had designed it so that in order to win and beat the bad guys, we would have to become champions of the gods and collect special weapons that previous champions held to give us enough of a power boost that we might have a chance at defeating the bad guys. And notice, I say chance. The other aspect of all of this is that our characters don't even feel all that powerful. We are constantly being beaten, barely surviving encounters because we get saved by some more powerful being, or because we barely manage to escape. Regardless, none of the feats are our own, and any clever tricks we have are often overruled by Pat saying, quote, "I'm the DM, whatever I say goes." And at even slightly before 11th level, villains we have come across have had 30 strength, 5 legendary actions, the Sentinel feat to try and prevent us from fleeing, even up to having 2 9th level spell slots, and even a 10th level one. The game no longer feels like it's something we were able to win, but a scenario of the party versus Pat, where Pat makes all of the rules. The past 3 months of the campaign have almost strictly been railroaded as well. We were thrown into the 9 hells and instructed to free Levistus in the 5th layer, and given a compass that tells us exactly where we need to go. It's all so bad that it's been hard to even convince half the group to play. To try and give us a break, I offered to start a campaign of my own, but Pat is almost as bad of a player as the dungeon master he currently is. The character Pat brought to me is a blatant ripoff of Percy and Caleb from Critical Role. If you took the appearance and personality of Caleb and combined it with the class and backstory of Percy, you would have a near perfect replica of his character. When suggesting ideas for where I could take his story, he told me he didn't want it to be too similar to Percy's story. I don't even have the room to make it different. Take that and add on the fact that he has tried to pressure me into letting the party level up one session after their last level up, and when no one else wanted to. The rules he constantly argues with me on despite taking no criticisms or suggestions in his own game, or the fact that he continuously creates discord amongst the rest of the party, and then gets mad when the story doesn't move forward. Even getting mad at me for letting a different player have a moment that was pivotal to their character arc. It has reached a boiling point where I don't want to invite him back to my table, or play in any of his games ever again. My point in all this is that D&D is a collaborative storytelling game where everyone gets a say in how it's played, not just one person. The game shouldn't mirror a live stream played by professional voice actors just because one person wants their game to be just like that. I think overall, Critical Role has had a positive effect on the way D&D is played, but in this scenario, the opposite is true. The game is about creating fun, not replicating it, and the DM should never try to win or force the players to do something just because it's the only way their story will work. I'll tell you what, reading stories like these really makes me appreciate the DMs I have in my games. Angie and Nina, if you're watching, just know we couldn't ask for any better. I've never DM'd myself, but I can imagine all the work that goes into making a world and story that players find engaging and look forward to finding out what happens next. Have you ever had a bad experience with a DM that you would like to share? Or would you like to share a good story about a fantastic DM? I would love to read about them in the comments. If you have a story you would like to be read on the channel, you can always link it below or post it in the channel subreddit, r/D&D Doge. Anyways, remember to occasionally thank your DMs. I guarantee they will appreciate it. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and hope all of your rolls are natural 20s. Until next video.